speaking, they have not proven to be extremely fatal. However, what we're dealing with now, the novel coronavirus, COVID-20, this is not a natural coronavirus. This is a genetically engineered, weaponized version of coronavirus that has been married to 4 genes from HIV and probably other genes from perhaps other viral pathogens. The short history is Dr. Lieber of Harvard University, the chief biomolecular scientist at Harvard University, dug up some frozen bodies from the tundra in Alaska. This was maybe 3 or 4 years ago, to investigate what killed them during the Spanish flu epidemic. He isolated that virus from 100 years ago and resurrected it, you could say. But found out that because of the frozen conditions over time, the virus had lost its infectivity. You may question, why would somebody dig up a virus that killed over 100 million people and brought an end to World War I? Well, you would have to ask Dr. Lieber that. But he did that, and then when the infectivity was not what he wanted, then he paired it with 4 genes from HIV and perhaps some other things. And now you have a highly contagious coronavirus that is infecting human beings. And not only from animal to human transmission, but now verified cases human to human transmission through the air. So you could say that this coronavirus 2020 is the descendant of the MERS virus, the Middle Eastern respiratory virus that killed many people in the Middle East, and the SARS virus that I think that goes back to 2003, 2004, that killed many, many people. Now, the SARS virus was the first indication to the Chinese people that someone was out to get them. The SARS virus was genetically engineered to infect Asian people, preferably. And the Chinese realized this. And so since that time, they have actually been on the defensive. Now, the question is whether this latest virus is also a bioweapon engineered to destroy people of Asian descent. And it seems to have another feature. It seems to preferentially infect men as opposed to women. Seems to be much more lethal in men than women. And even though it's considered to be a respiratory virus that causes a respiratory illness, the other interesting factor is that it seems to have a predilection for male testicles. And even in those that recover, the question is, will they be sterilized as after this COVID infection, even if they survive? Bill Gates, along with Dr. Lieber and Johns Hopkins University in October of 2019, conducted a simulation, computer simulation of a coronavirus outbreak, and they determined through computer simulations that such an outbreak would lead to the death of 65 million people. Now, the current experience in China with a 2.3% mortality rate shows that globally we could expect at least 165 million deaths from this virus. So what is it all for? I think it's for the purpose of slowing down the growth of China as a dominant economic, political, and economic power in the world. That is, of course, if it really is a bioweapon. If it's not really a bioweapon, it certainly has taken the U.S.-China trade war to another level. Trade war has become biological warfare, and people are being targeted with their lives. Part of the trade war, of course, was the controversy with a company called Huawei, the leaders in 5G technology. The center of 5G technology is China, and the center of 5G technology in China is Wuhan City, or Hubei, in Hubei province. And when they turned on or switched on the most potent 5G network in the world in Wuhan City, that's when the epidemic broke out. So there are scientists who think that there is an electronic component to what would otherwise just be a biological phenomenon. A virus is on the borderline of living things versus non-living things. It is protein wrapped around genetic material, either RNA or DNA. It is susceptible to electronic frequencies. Viruses can be activated by 5G 60 cycle frequency radiation that was turned on in Wuhan City and just coincidentally happened at the same time as a viral outbreak. Could there be a connection? One final point that I think the world should consider. From my point of view as a medical doctor, someone who knows a little bit about public health, I don't think that the Chinese government could be faulted in any way for their response to whatever happened, whether it was a natural phenomenon or whether it turns out to really be a bio attack. But their response to it was heroic and correct. They built 3 1,000-bed hospitals in a little more than a week. That is phenomenal. They provided hospital care for thousands of people who otherwise would have been left out in the cold to die. And so this is something to ponder. Is the United States capable of the same response, public health wise? Is Europe capable of the same response? Is Africa, is India, are the other nations, are Brazil and other nations in South America and throughout the world? Is Japan, Korea, are they capable of the same heroic, monumental public health measures undertaken by the Chinese, who seem, optimistically I'm speaking now, they seem to have contained the spread of the virus in China through these drastic means. But suppose you had the same level of infection in New York City or Los Angeles or Chicago or some other major city in Europe, as we now see in Italy and Spain and Germany, cases breaking out. Well, this is the tip of the iceberg. 80-some cases now in Long Island, New York, in Los Angeles, in Texas, and other places. People under quarantine. We don't know how many people are really infected because the CDC has only given a little more than 400 tests total. So if they're reporting 50 or 60 cases, that sounds like a small number, and it is, but you'd only tested 400 people. So how can you be sure about the total number of infections in the country? You can't be. So all precautions must be in order. Facial masks are not going too far. Frequent hand washing is not going too far. Avoiding contact with public surfaces is not going too far. Avoiding public gatherings is not going too far. We don't actually know the full characteristics of what we're dealing with, but we must take those things into consideration that we are learning, where these outbreaks are taking place throughout the world. A weak Clorox solution, a cap full of Clorox in a gallon of water, can be used as a disinfectant on surfaces. I use essential oils mixed in water, things like geranium and other essential oils, eucalyptus, camphor. These essential oils mixed in water, sprayed in a house, will keep germs at bay. These are old-fashioned, traditional methods. I think the public health service in America is so decrepit and disabled that every American citizen should consider you're on your own. And you have to do what you can do to protect yourself and your family, because I don't think that the government agencies are going to be able. They're not equipped. The hospitals don't have the space to accommodate you. So you're going to have to accommodate yourself. Well, the question about whether or not this COVID-20, coronavirus, is natural or man-made, I think that the fact that it is man-made is beyond question right now. I think the genetic sequences that have been done throughout the world shows that it did not have a natural origin. You can't naturally combine HIV genes with coronavirus genes. That just doesn't happen in nature. However, nature is capable of things that we may not be able to conceive of. So, for example, One of the things that people are becoming aware of are the tremendous number of deaths that take place every year from ordinary influenza. In the United States, for example, every year you will have between 30 and 40,000 deaths from regular influenza. And that's considered to be normal. And it could even range higher than that, 60, 70,000 per year, and some years lower than that. So we have good seasons and bad seasons. This is from influenza. Well, where did the influenza virus come from? I'm using this as an example for all viruses. Where did they come from? Well, if you have, as you do in China, a situation where you have population congestion, you have human beings living in close proximity with animals. You have human beings living in close proximity to pigs and ducks and chickens. And so the history of influenza is that this is a virus that naturally recombined to produce something that can cause human disease. A bird virus infects a duck in a pond in China. That bird virus gets picked up by a pig who drinks from that pond water. And then that virus recombines inside the body of the pig so that it begins to infect the pig. A bird virus, in other words, has now jumped into a pig. And then who lives right next to the pig, or who ends up eating the pig or slaughtering the pig, is a human being. And so now an original bird virus that somehow was able to infect a pig now makes a second leap, species leap, you could say, into a human being. And now a bird virus that became a swine virus is now a human virus, and we call it influenza. And it has been plaguing the world ever since people thought it was a good idea to live in close proximity to a food source like ducks and pigs. So it's possible, it's remotely possible, that this novel coronavirus is a natural virus, like they say. It came from a meat market in China. It came from bats. It came from this. It came from that. Well, that sounds like the green monkey story related to HIV. And then it turns out green monkeys had very little to do with HIV. Human biomolecular engineers had everything to do with the development of HIV as a biological weapon. And I think that the evidence is very strong right now. And I think the proof positive will come in the future. This was a biologically engineered weapon, probably done by Dr. Lieber and his team from Harvard University in conjunction with Johns Hopkins University and with Wuhan University in China and other government agencies in China. They developed this. They will have to explain to the world why they thought this. Common colds that people have had are due to coronaviruses. Generally speaking, they have not proven to be extremely fatal. However, what we're dealing with now, the novel coronavirus, COVID-20, this is not a natural.
I want to just allow some time for folks to go ahead and get on. I want to welcome everybody who decided to join me here for my presentation. I'm a little bit early, but that's because I wanted to drop this very heavy, very, very heavy informational, 100% science-based video here. Dr. Abdul Aleem Muhammad, great Black doctor who originally at the start of the coronavirus pandemic, spoke on what, from his medical professional standpoint, what he believed to be coronavirus, and gave a quick definition on what a virus is, which is the topic of my presentation that I have put together for us here today. So I'm live here on Ask Siddiq. I'm live here, Yahoo Media Group. I'm live here on this broadcast, on this podcast, I guess you could say. I guess this is my podcast. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? For those who know me or don't know me, like I said, I want to get some time to get on because I'm going to spend a brief second to just kind of let the spirits and let the energy just settle, you know, because there's so much information that I want to run through in a brief amount of time. Again, this is a live presentation that I have put together here. My name is Siddiq. I mean, if you're viewing this on Facebook, of course, 100%, you know who I am, or you know me. Of course, I've invited you to this broadcast, this presentation, this podcast. I guess this is my podcast. You know what I'm saying? So everybody viewing this podcast, and again, this is a live stream. I'm not expecting hundreds and hundreds of people on here. You know, I'm 100% everyday average brother. You know, for those who know me from my activism as a nationalist in the Black community, my work that I've done with the new Black Panther Party for self-defense under the national chairwoman, Sister Krista Muhammad. I'm no longer in that revolutionary formation, but again, I give thanks to my sister and what she's taught me, and I take that and move it along. And I'm on the same frequency, giving information, but this time I'm just coming here, brothers and sisters. I'm just coming with some science, and I just want to drop it. I don't want to get into opinions. I don't want to get into theories, but let's just let the energy just settle. Let the energy just settle. Let it just settle, right? If you're listening in here with me on this broadcast here, 7 p.m. Central Time, I'm a little bit early because I had to drop Dr. Abdul Ali Muhammad, and I just want to let the energy settle. You know, you may be viewing this broadcast now 100%, 95% or so. If you tune into this broadcast based on the total people that watch it, you know me. Brother Siddiq, you know me, formerly in the new Black Panther Party for self-defense as the chief of staff. You know what I'm saying? Black power to my brothers and sisters in the revolutionary organizations, the new Black Panther Party, and all those who continue to struggle in our revolutionary endeavors. This is a science broadcast here. This is a family broadcast here because I want to bring some science information and present to you a brief science-based, we're going to just have a little science class, basically. Now, at the top of this broadcast, again, my name is Siddiq. You know, I have a media podcast or media channel here called the Uhuru Media Channel. This is my first broadcast. I've done many broadcasts. Again, I was served as the national chief of staff of the new Black Panther Party. I've dealt with many cases of injustice of the police department against our people, and I continue to serve our people. You know, those of you probably know me as a martial artist, kickboxer, and all these kind of things. I'm just your brother. You know what I'm saying? I'm not a nervous person, so I don't mind getting on here and giving this information. And I just want to just run through this and just, let's just discuss what a virus is, right? Because in the beginning of this broadcast, of this podcast, this is my podcast. You know what I'm saying? At the beginning of this broadcast and this podcast, I played Dr. Abdul Ali Muhammad. But again, I just want to let this thing just settle here. I just want to let this thing just settle. Let the energies, let the spirits, let the ancestors, let the great energies that have blessed us throughout time with knowledge and wisdom, African people, right? Black people, let this just simmer. This is great. I like this. I never thought that I would be doing a podcast, right? And I really want to just drop this science here, just drop it like, wow, you know what I'm saying? But I want to let the energy just simmer because I'm an everyday brother. Right? And I want to give this information on what is a virus. And at the top of this, because I feel the energy, right? I feel this wisdom. And because I do, I want to give thanks to all of the ancestors that have fought in the struggle for wisdom and knowledge, because it is intelligence. It is knowledge that makes a military strong. For those who understand are able to build great weapons and build great armies and win battles. So in this presentation, in the top of this presentation, I just want to let the ancestors just settle, right? For all of those that are taking out the time in your busy evening, if you just want to just relax and just let me drop this science on you like bam, just like that. For those of you that want to take notes, you're free to do that as well, right? But again, I just want to let the energy simmer, because in this presentation, as I opened up this presentation at the top of the broadcast, the podcast, I gave a little Dr. Abdul Ali Muhammad. right? Great Black scientist, right? Has his ties with the Nation of Islam. Great Black man who has really just taken the front line on when it comes just understanding just science, right? From a perspective of just understanding simple things, simple definitions to complex sciences. I love to take a stance along the wisdom and knowledge of Dr. Abdul Alim Muhammad. And I must say this, it is Dr. Abdul Alim Muhammad, how he presented when he first dropped his information on what he explained, what is a virus. And I'll play it again throughout this broadcast. It was so powerful that I became obsessed. Now, I want to make a disclaimer. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a medical professional. I don't have any degrees in any science-based, medical-based. I don't work in a hospital. I don't work in emergency medicine. I am not here to spread disinformation. I believe that as a people, we must understand basic sciences, basic building blocks of sciences, because we have been living through this pandemic. No doubt. Many of us have lost our jobs. Many of us, we're struggling still from the effects of this pandemic, and it has been tragic. Many lives have been lost across the board, right? And we send our condolences to everyone and anyone who have lost someone, who have fell ill to this virus, this COVID, right? So it popped into my head when this thing first broke out. I say, listen, it will benefit us as a people. It will benefit myself as someone who loves the people. So to understand from a basic level on what is a virus, right? Just the basic understanding the science of what is a virus, right? And just let the energies just settle, right? And I just want to get into this, right? Now, I have this broken down into different sections of information, because it's a lot, right? But it's simple. And I believe my theory is through us understanding these basic definitions, these basic things. I'm gonna drop it. Understanding these basic things will be able to take that and say, okay, now I can make an informed decision on my choices moving forward, dealing with whatever it may be, whether it be vaccination, whether it be whatever, whether it be survival, whether it be what should I do if I get ill, whatever. We're able to make a decision based on informed information of basic sciences. So I have this broken down, right? And I want to drop it. And then in some part or portion, yeah, we're live. I'll take questions. Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe I want y'all to ask me questions. Maybe I don't want you to ask me questions. I don't know yet. You know what I'm saying? But just rock with me. You know what I'm saying? And we're going to drop this just like this. So on part one of this presentation, this science presentation again, and I want to let everybody know, you can find me on Facebook. You can find me Abdul Siddiq on Facebook. You can also find me on Instagram. Those are the two channels that I'm broadcasting from right now. Yahuwah Media. Now on Instagram, you can find me. And then on Facebook, you can find me Abdul Siddiq. Add me. I'll be your friend. Send me a DM. Let's talk about science. Let's talk about culture. Let's talk about history. I'm your brother, Mr. Average Brother. I'm trying to tell y'all. But at the same time, I want to continue to grow supreme in knowledge and wisdom and be able to continue to get that to the people. And I'm humbly doing this. I just want to do it because I just want it to be sit on the records of time, just like that, right? And I'm very excited. And I want to thank you if you've taken out the time to join me here this evening on this presentation, What is a Virus? Ask Siddiq live. Now, I also got a new thing going because I'm trying to get into all this social media game, trying to, set myself up to where this can become a brand. And if you have been with me through my journey of giving wisdom and knowledge, work in the community and out in the field, look, I thank you, right? But another way that you can support me is, of course, share this live stream. Let other people know that this is broadcasted, whether you're watching on YouTube or whether you're watching on Facebook, right? You can find me on YouTube by searching Ask Siddiq. You find me on YouTube, go to my YouTube channel. You can also go to my Patreon. You can subscribe to my Patreon. It's absolutely free at the moment. You can go to patreon.com, Ask Siddiq, patreon.com/Ask Siddiq. Represent for me, because I'm going to represent for you here tonight as I drop this information on this science, 100% science-based presentation on what is a virus, as Siddiq, I want to start on the first point because, again, understanding a virus for me, how I began to teach myself, just as a person who just been interested in just knowing and just letting the ancestors just wrap that knowledge around me and just continue to take this in. One of the things that I began to understand is I have to understand what a virus isn't, right? When understanding a virus, we have to understand that viruses are the information from a virus, the substance from a virus comes from either DNA or RNA. There's never been a virus discovered that has both DNA or RNA, right? So, of course, the coronavirus is a retrovirus, is an RNA virus. Now, to understand what a virus in itself, we have to understand nucleic acids. We have to understand biomolecules. We have to understand genome or genetics. And we also have to understand proteins and a lot more. But let's start there. Nucleic acids, biomolecules, right? Let's understand genome or genetics and proteins. Now, viruses are built from short sequences of nucleic acids, either DNA or RNA, which are types of nucleic acids, right? So then this nucleic acid, DNA or RNA, is wrapped in a protein shell, right? And until the invention of the microscope or the electron microscope, you couldn't see a virus. It's so small, these living but not living, on the brink of living or dead substances, these viruses that we've been dealing with through our time, right? The first virus to be visualized were bacteriophage, which appeared to have a head and tail-like structure. Only the nucleic acid entered the bacteria cell through the tail. Animal viruses were described as spherical or rod-shaped, and they were bound to receptors and were taken up by the cell. After the crystallization of the tobacco mosaic virus, and I want to talk about that virus quickly, there was much discussion as to whether viruses were living organisms, and the controversy continues to this day. So that's the first thing you're going to hear when you begin to research viruses. That's the first thing I began to see, is that there's a big discussion in the scientific community, which is where we will stay throughout this podcast. There's a big discussion in the scientific community on whether viruses are living or dead, right? But again, as we look into this, you're going to find how it works, and through the replication process, is both, right? In transitions between the two, I almost look at it like a butterfly or something like that in some weird kind of scientific way, right? So a tobacco mosaic virus, if you've seen like a plant or a tree or a bush, and you'll see almost this, I ain't gonna lie, I couldn't figure out how to attach the files. I can only figure out how to attach the videos. I have a picture of this mosaic virus, but if you look it up, it's almost like if you know vitiligo, it's almost like vitiligo on a leaf of a plant, and you'll see this brown and black and white kind of brim start to form on a plant's leaf or a tree's leaf. That's the tobacco mosaic virus. That was one of the first viruses to really be looked at, and they seen the structure of the virus in the scientific community. Now, nucleic acids are important to understand because, again, viruses are DNA or RNA wrapped in a protein shell. DNA or RNA are nucleic acids. DNA and RNA are nucleic acids. DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, deoxy meaning the type of sugar, ribonucleic acid, DNA, and then ribonucleic acid, RNA, ribose being the type of sugar for RNA, right? Okay, so what is a nucleic acid in the most basic way that we can understand it? The nucleic acids are large biomolecules that play essential roles in all cells and viruses. So a major function of nucleic acids involve the storage and expression of genomic information. Genomic information, family, is the information that is produced by the genome, and the genome is that in the cell which stores information, genetic information. So it's very key that we look at this, and we can look at this scientifically as we begin through our knowledge of self. We can look at this spiritually as well. How do I say that? Well, because of atoms, when we talk about biomolecules, nucleic acids are large biomolecules. A molecule is an atom bound to another atom. Two atoms bound together, and through a chemical bond, they make molecules. A biomolecule is a molecule that is produced by a living organism, by an organic thing. Then they produce biomolecules like us, like a plant, like an animal. So these molecules are atoms. again takes you to that spiritual concept, whether you look at it from Christianity, Islam, Judaism, regardless of where you look at it from, Catholicism. We're not here to speak on that. We'll stick with the science of it, right? No matter how you look at it, you'll get Adam. Adam, if you go a little bit further back in etymology, you'll find is Adama as well, meaning red clay. Also, you find these different stories in folklore throughout African traditional folklore, the things that we know as people that we're beginning to relearn of the building of those through clay. And you'll find these things in the Bible and the Quran, and you see these things, right? And you begin to understand how Adam and Atom began to come into reciprocity and understanding. When you research a virus, you have to understand what a molecule is, because nucleic acids, DNA or RNA, are large biomolecules. A molecule are two atoms combined together, and then you get a molecule, right? See, it's simple when we begin to break it down. A molecule, water is a molecule, right? Let's kind of go into that, right? Because we're gonna go into time, but I want to kind of drop it and I want to move on, and then we come back if we need to, because I don't want to spend too much time, right? It doesn't take long to give simple definitions. A molecule, right? These molecules are two or more atoms connected together by a chemical bond. So let's give examples of a molecule, right? So a molecule, H2O, right? One hydrogen, two oxygen, chemical element, the chemical element of oxygen, the chemical element of hydrogen, two of the chemical element of oxygen gives you water, which is a molecule, okay? That is a molecule. A biomolecule would be DNA, because it is produced by living organisms. It is in the cells. It makes up the cells and the structures of our being. Viruses are DNA or RNA wrapped in a protein shell. Then the virus attaches onto a host, is parasitic, and then causes the host to carry out its genomic transformation through the host biological genomic structures that you already have. So it attaches to you and takes over. Now, that is how we have to understand it, right? DNA is a biomolecule. RNA is a biomolecule. Molecules are two atoms that are put together, and through a chemical bond, boom, you have hydrogen, two oxygen, you have water. I want to talk about another example of a molecule. Another example of a molecule, ethanol. You see as it's scrolling across. So ethanol is written, right, for the layman, for the people, you know what I'm saying, like me, who just are humble people who are doing this research and just trying to bring this knowledge to us. Ethanol, as we know, is liquor, right? We know what ethanol is. Some of us consume a lot of ethanol, but ethanol is a molecule just the same as H2O. Why must we understand this? And of course, this is the chemical, expression of ethanol that's scrolling across the screen here. Now, why must we understand what ethanol and water is and the chemical expression of the molecular breakdown? Because again, a virus is DNA or RNA wrapped in a protein shell. It is through that structure that it attaches onto a host and expresses itself and replicates into the body of the host. Now, a nucleic acid or DNA is a large biomolecule, and a biomolecule is a molecule produced by the body. An example of a molecule is water. H2O is the molecular breakdown or molecular expression of water, and ethanol's molecular expression, as we see as it's scrolling across the bottom, it is CH3CH2OH or C2H5OH. But then I just broke it down because, you know, we got to understand it, right? Just from a basic concept. 2 carbon, 5 hydrogen, and 1 oxygen gives you ethanol. It gives you ethanol, right? So again, that is just an example. Again, just an example. So in this first part of what is a virus, I'm talking about what is a molecule, right? What is a molecule? A molecule are 2 atoms bound together. They form chemical elements. Those chemical elements you can find expressed in the periodic table. I ain't got no periodic table for you. You got to go get your own periodic table and bring it next time, right? Because we're not getting into all that. I just want to talk about what a virus is. Okay, let's move forward again with molecule. Let's talk about biomolecules. There are 4 types of biomolecules. There could be more, you know what I'm saying? But from my research that I'm presenting here tonight, there are 4 types of biomolecules. There are 4 types of biomolecules. And again, molecules are those genomic expressions of the 2 atoms bound together to make the molecule that is expressed through the body. These substances are called biomolecules. There are 4 types of biomolecules that, of course, once you begin to understand what a virus is, you begin to learn these 4 types of biomolecules, right? You have lipids, you have proteins, you have carbohydrates, and you have nucleic acids. We've been talking about nucleic acids, right? DNA and RNA, those are nucleic acids, right? So we know what nucleic acids is at some point, right? Let's talk about lipids, proteins, carbohydrates, and then how that all works out with viruses. Now, we have to understand this. A virus, although expresses itself in some form, the reason why you have that argument in the scientific community is because virus is parasitic in its life cycle, which means that it does not have organelles and the functions that a living organism or living cell would have. And this is how it expresses itself, through the attachment onto the host. And that is why I just have that geek, that nerd feeling, because you just want to understand what this is. You know what I'm saying? So again, let's look at it. So lipids are fatty wax-like molecules found in the human body and other organisms. They serve several different roles in the body, including fueling the body, storing energy for the future, and sending signals through the body, being a constituent of cell membranes. Now, the cell membrane holds the cell together. The lipid works with the cell membrane as this fatty-like substance, right, to continue to store energy and fuel the body. And this is how we begin to understand it. So I look at the lipid as, you know, that motion, that energy that works throughout the cellular expression throughout the body, right? So that's one biomolecule, lipids, right? Then you have proteins. Proteins are large, complex molecules. Again, molecules, 2 atoms bound together through a chemical expression. They form a molecule like H2O, water, or ethanol, right? We say ethanol was 2 carbon, 5 hydrogen, 1 oxygen, right? So proteins are large, complex molecules, biomolecules that play many important roles in the body. We could do a whole podcast on proteins, right? Very important. They are critical to most of the work done by the cells and are required for the structure, function, and regulation of the body's tissues and organs. Very, very important. A protein is made up of 1 or more long folded chain of amino acids, right? Now, these when these amino acids are in these long chains, these long folded chains, that are called polypeptides. We're going to get into that, right? Whose sequences are determined by the DNA sequence of the protein encoded gene. Again, gene, or the genomic information. That which expresses the genomic information is the nuclei, or the nucleus. The nucleus produces a nucleic acid called DNA or RNA. A virus is nucleic acids, DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, or RNA ribonucleic acid wrapped in a protein shell. Again, proteins are large, complex molecules that play many important roles in the body. They are critical to most of the work done by the cells and are required for the structure, function, and regulation of the body's tissues and organs. So this is why when you get a virus, it begins to break down the organs and affect the organs. That's not theory. That's the science of it all. That's the science of it all, because again, this DNA and RNA is wrapped in this protein shell, and that protein expression begins to affect the tissues and the organs. And we see this virus as it fights the body and it takes over. So we have to understand what it is at its core. Now, folded chains of amino acids. Amino acids are an organic compound produced by organisms. There are many amino acids in nature. There are 20 different types of amino acids that can be combined to make a protein. So amino acids are the breakdown of protein. The sequence of the amino acids determine the structure of the protein and its function. When these amino acids come together, they are called polypeptide. These polypeptide are protein. The protein is the skin, you would say, of the virus as it is wrapped around the nucleic acid, the DNA or the RNA. This is, again, what is a virus? With your brother, Siddiq, right? And we just breaking this thing down here on what this is. Then you have a carbohydrate, right? Another type of biomolecule. So a carbohydrate or a carb are also known as carbs, are vital at every stage of life. They're the body's primary source of energy and the brain's preferred energy source. Carbs are broken down by the body into glucose, a type of sugar. Now, there's also, you have deoxyribose, in DNA, that's a type of sugar. You have ribose, that's a type of sugar in RNA. Then the body breaks down carbohydrates and creates a sugar called glucose. That glucose is used as fuel for the body's cells, tissues, and organs. Again, now we're seeing why, once you understand what this thing is, you see how it's affecting us, right? That's my hope when we're doing this, right? And those are your 4 types of biomolecules: lipids, proteins, carbohydrates, and nucleic acids. Let's move it on along, because I want to move it on along, right? Because again, it doesn't take long to give simple definitions. When we talk about genome or genetic information, we're talking about the branch of molecular biology concerned with the structure, function, evolution, and mapping of genomes or genetics. Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden, and this is in the book of Genesis. In Genesis, you have the word genetics. In Adam, you have the word Adama, or beginning, or red clay, that which forms man. Then you have Eve, which means the beginning. If you take this and vibe it all together, you see how the science and the spirituality work one and the same. And this we believe to be so in the great empires of Africa, that we got to tap back into that knowledge to really understand what's going on with this. So DNA is a term. So let's get into DNA and RNA, moving this thing along. Grooving, moving and grooving. Sit back, relax. Let me just, serenade you with this scientific, biological conversation. You know what I'm saying? So now, DNA is a term that is an abbreviation for deoxyribonucleic acid. Let me drop it for you. A nucleic acid or biological molecule. Now, we know now what that is. Small units that carry genetic information that allows for us to pass on traits, moving onward into our natural development. And really, every function of biological existence, DNA looks like a double helix, a twisted ladder. Under the microscope, it is made up of alternating sugars and protein. Now we know what protein is, base groups. There are 4 bases connected by, again, chemical bonds. And this is how we are able to have generations of amazing, successful people. But this is also the way viruses are able to latch on to the host and cause mayhem. And this is why we have to understand the breakdown of this from its onset, from the actual breakdown of this thing called a virus, which again is genetic material, DNA, RNA, nucleic acid wrapped in a protein shell, and it latches on. This DNA information in DNA is stored as a code made up of 4 chemical bases. You will see it on the double helix breakdown. I would, say, after this, go and look at a breakdown of the DNA, right? I believe I have a video here. But if you look at the breakdown of DNA, right? Let's see if I can find this video really quickly. DNA is stored and made up of 4 chemical bases. You will see A, G, C, and T. A is adenine, G is guanine, C is cytosine, and T is thymine. Now, human DNA consists of about 3 billion bases, and more than 99% of those bases are in this. They say they're in the same. They're all the same in people, but again, this is the basic understanding. We're gonna drop this on some different episodes and really dig into all of this, right? So the order and sequence of these bases determines the information available for building and maintaining an organism like you and me, similar to the way in which letters of the alphabet appear in a certain order to form words and sentences, right? So that's one way of understanding it. DNA bases pair up with each other, A with T, or adenine with thymine, and C with G, or cytosine with guanine, right? To form units called base pairs. And I'm gonna play this video. Each base is also attached to a sugar molecule and a phosphate molecule. Again, together, a base, sugar, and phosphate are called a nucleotide. Now, this is important. Nucleotides are arranged in 2 long strands that form a spiral called a double helix. And the structure of the double helix is somewhat like a ladder, with the base pairs forming the ladders base pairs in the sugars and phosphate molecules forming the vertical side pieces of the ladder. And I'm going to show you exactly what I'm talking about, right? Because I can show you better than I can tell you. So let's look at this video right here. So
the DNA double helix contains two sequences of nucleotides.
Shut up. I don't want her talking, right? But this is a double helix. Now, if you look at, and I'll go back again, if you look at it, that purple outlining, that is your, again, those protein bases, right? Sometimes you have this, not sometimes, but you also have this nitrogen thing going on here. But again, those are those base pairs, A and T and G and C. And you remember this from high school? You remember this from middle school? This is basic knowledge. We got to understand this at a basic level, at least, right? At least understand this from basic level so that we can understand how viruses work, right? I want to go back to when the structure was like this here, right? And if I just pause it here, I want you to see what I'm talking about here, right? So you see these base pairs are those parts in the middle of this double helix, right? And these base pairs are this alphabetic scientific expression. This is how all DNA is encoded, and this is what a virus uses to take course on the human body. Now, I'm gonna take this video off. Maybe I'll bring it back up again. Maybe we'll go back to DNA. I don't know. But moving along, I want to say this. You also have RNA, because RNA is just ribonucleic acid, right? You don't have the deoxy part in it. So it's a little bit different, right? Because you're going to have a difference in the expression of the nucleic acid, right? So you'll have a difference in the expression of the virus as opposed to a DNA virus and an RNA virus. So this is very important, right? Ribonucleic acid, abbreviated RNA, is a nucleic acid present in all living cells that has structural similarities to DNA. Unlike DNA, however, RNA is most often single-stranded. So it's not double-stranded. It's not like the little 3D projection that I just showed, right? So an RNA molecule has a backbone made up of alternating phosphate groups and the sugar ribose, as I explained, ribonucleic acid. Now, rather than the deoxyribose found in DNA, attached to each sugar is one of the four bases. You have adenine, cytosine, and guanine, the same as DNA, but replacing, you also have uracil, right? That's going to come in there, and that's that difference in the genomic expression. Now, ribosomal RNA and transfer RNA, you have messenger RNA, you have different types of RNA. And you heard when they were talking about the vaccine, how they have this messenger RNA. Most of us didn't know what the hell messenger RNA was, right? But if we understand what it is, we can better make informed decisions on if we are and aren't going to let folks stick us with a vaccine or not. Whatever your decision is, right? This is not a broadcast to get you to do something or say anything about your political or belief in anything. I'm just telling the science like it is. This is what a virus is at its molecular level. And I hope that you're able to gain something from what I'm bringing here. And I hope that I'm not boring you. A virus translates itself and replicates itself in a non-binary process. Now, binary replication is also what you may know as a nuclear fission, where you see once one cell will go into another, right? And that will go into four. And then you just have that's not how a virus replicates. The mode of replication is non-binary. Binary means one divides into two, two divides into four, and all this kind of stuff, as in most organisms, but occurs as a burst of thousands of virus particles from a single virus over a short time. Viruses are also unique in that they contain either RNA or DNA as the genetic material. To date, no virus has been discovered that contains both types of nucleic acid as genetic material, although both types are used during virus replication in the cell. Viruses do not contain ribosomes, mitochondria, or other cell-like organelles. Thus, they are completely parasitic. And that's what I want to get into at this point. I want to get into what an organelle is, because again, for us to understand what a virus is, we got to understand what a virus is not. A virus is not able to produce its own energy. It has to get its energy from you, right? Now, we know some people that are viruses, we're not going there tonight. I told myself I wasn't going to go there tonight, right? So going into this, we know that the cell has different organs, right? The same as you have a lung or heart, the same as you got a stomach and kidney, a brain. A cell's brain is the nucleus, A cell's, we could say, I don't know, kidney, even heart, maybe it could be a mitochondria. What is a mitochondria? It's a organelle or a structure inside of a cell that does something or many things, has many functions that which powers the cell, right? So you got many different organelles. I'm going to give you two examples. One is a mitochondria. It's an organelle, a structure that functions inside of cells. Mitochondria generate the chemical energy required to power cells' biochemical reactions. When a mitochondria stores its chemical energy, it is in the form of the molecule adenosine. Don't judge me. Adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. Now, once you begin to study a virus, you're going to see, when you begin to study cells, you will see this ATP. You're going to see this popping up all the time. Again, that's a whole podcast within itself, right? And once you begin to break that down, you'll understand the mitochondria a little bit more, how it works to store energy. Now, mitochondria contain their own chains of genetic information or chromosomes, and when that information is passed on to offspring, it is from the mother in the form of mitochondrial DNA. And that is another type of DNA that only comes from the mother. So the traits that come from the mitochondrial DNA are traits that only come from the mother and that are transferred on to the offspring. Now, the reason why we have to know this is because a virus can't do that. It relies on our ability to do that, to transfer energy. It has to latch on to a host. So we have to understand, right? That's one organelle. Another organelle is a ribosome. These, again, are intercellular structures, meaning they function inside of a cell. Ribosomes are working all the time to translate the sequences or the genetic codes, and they grow into these long chains of amino acids or polypeptides that form proteins. Ribosomes are one of the key structures in cellular function because they work together they work along with the protein process, right? To go through you need the ribosome to have protein synthesis, to express the information in the protein. It's very important, right? Now, a virus doesn't have a ribosome, doesn't have the ability to translate genetic coding, and doesn't have the ability to give itself energy or store energy, so it needs a host. Thus, a virus is parasitic. This is the most interesting thing to me, right? Somebody who is studying this on my free time and just, again, I always have this need to bring this information, but the thing that kind of just amazes me about a virus, right? Because we amaze at these things as science nerds, right? What is a virus? Because that's the topic. And I find it almost, wow, just this parasitic activity that viruses have, right? A parasite or parasitism is a close relationship between species, right? Where one organism, the parasite, lives on or inside another organism, the host, causing it some harm, and it is adapted structurally to this way of life. This is the case with viruses, and even some organisms live parasitic life cycles. So in the ocean, you'll see whales, and then you'll have these smaller fish, these smaller mammals that will attach on to the whale, and they live a parasitic lifestyle feeding from the waste of the whale. You have a flea that attaches on to the coat of a dog or a cat, and that is a parasite. So a virus is something like a flea that attacks the cell, something like a leech that attacks the cell. And the virus, the coronavirus, is, of course, it's a virus. So it's the same again. I'm not here to talk about your belief on how or if you believe in this pandemic. I'm just here to tell us and go on to this conversation on what is a virus. That's the discussion. That's the explanation. What is a virus? So now we know from a base level what a virus is. And we even know some parts on what a virus is not. Now, I want to get into the replication process of a virus. I want to talk about a specific type of virus and many types of viruses. I want to talk about a retrovirus. A retrovirus, and the reason why I took us through that process is because now we'll be able in this conversation to discuss many different aspects of a virus. Also, again, is replication. We'll be able to talk about the replication of a virus, and we'll be able to talk about what is an antiviral. Now, how can you not know what a virus is, then understand what a virus is, then you know what a virus is, and you never understand what an antivirus is? We have to know that there is defenses to viruses, right? Whether it be botanical through your boosting your immunity system with different types of herbs and things like that, or whether it be through other means, medical means that you've taken up with your primary doctor. I ain't your doctor. I'm not a doctor. You know what I'm saying? I'm just your brother, and I got some information I want to present to you. And I hope that this information you can share on to other people, and we as a community can begin to understand basic sciences. So never again are they able to tell us that we got sick blood, knowing that we had syphilis, and watch us as we die, right? We know what we're dealing with. When we know what a virus is, can't nobody come and tell you what it's not or what it is or what's in it or what's not. You know that a virus is nucleic acid, either DNA or RNA, wrapped in a protein shell that then expresses itself in a parasitic life cycle into the cells and functions of the human body or animal body, depending. And we also know that cells can affect all organic things, also plants, because again, if we go back, let's do a little homework. One of the first viruses to ever be looked at was the tobacco mosaic virus, which is a virus that affects plants. You see, so it's in plants, animals, and living human beings, right? So I want to look at the viral replication process of a retrovirus. A retrovirus is the type of virus in the viral family called Retroviridae, right? They use RNA as the genetic material, not DNA, and are named for a specific enzyme. And that's a vital part of their life cycle. And that enzyme is called reverse transcriptase. And that's very important because this reverse transcriptase allows for the retrovirus. Now, coronavirus is a retrovirus and HIV is a retrovirus. And I want to take an informed view into the HIV replication process, because now that we know what a virus is, we can take a brief look into how viruses go through the process of replication when they attach into or onto the host. That is very key because it takes us more into now understanding what a virus's function is in nature. You see, because viruses can be manufactured by man and scientists, and viruses are also produced in nature, right? So we want to look at the replication process of a virus. You have a few different processes in the replication process, right? Or a few different steps in the replication process, right? You have the attachment phase, you have the entry phase, you have the reverse transcription, you have the genome integration, you have the replication, you have the assembly, and then you have the release of the virus. Now, we're again looking at HIV, particularly HIV is a type of virus called a retrovirus, and I want to take an informed view on the replication process of an HIV virus and how it expresses itself in the human body. So the first step is attachment. Attachment, the virus binds to a receptor on the surface of the host cell, right? So we'll use example of I'm the person, knock on wood, that has this type of virus. That virus would then go into attach onto my cells, right? In the case of HIV, this receptor is found on the surface of immune cells called CD4 T cells. Now, this is important. Why does the virus needs to go after cells that are immune to it? Because they need to attack the strongest cells first. And that's what you find out, that these viruses are very crafty. You almost feel like you're talking about chess or battle or war, and we are. We're talking about a genetic microscopic war that goes on between, we battle these viruses, and we got to know more about them as a community. I speak to Black people. I don't speak against any other people, but I speak to Black people. That's just me. And we have to understand this, right? Okay, so this attachment process is the first step of HIV, and then the attachment process moves on to the second phase. The second phase of the HIV replication process from an informed view is called entry, right? This is when the envelope surrounding the HIV particle fuses with the membrane of the host cell, allowing the virus to enter the cell. Now, then you have the phase that I talked about, reverse transcription now. So we're dealing with the HIV retrovirus's replication process when it goes into its parasitic life cycle inside of the human being, right? Now, reverse transcription. HIV uses its reverse transcriptase, which I talked about earlier. It's a special enzyme that you only find in retroviruses. So again, the reason why I picked this replication process is because it is spot on, dead on, if not exactly right on to the same process that coronavirus goes through as it moves into the body and does what it do what it does. You know what I'm saying? So HIV uses this reverse transcriptase enzyme to turn RNA into DNA. Now that we know that RNA is missing that ability in some ways to transfer that information, we see how it comes in a single strand, this HIV virus, and then it uses its reverse transcriptase enzyme to turn itself into a double strand. Yes, this is like battle, where a virus goes into the body as an RNA nucleic acid, and then it uses our cellular functions to bring itself into a DNA form, and then it goes into a double helix. Now, this is almost like a flank. If you study military warfare, it's like a attack from the rear. There's something that is very expressive, and that is why we see folks get so sick on the surface. We got to understand what's going on under the surface, and then, of course, just theoretically, that's why I believe folks begin so sick, is because, of course, we have this very expressive, just virus that's in us that comes in like a little sneaky thief in the night. And again, you just gonna nerd out when you begin to really look at what a virus is. So we move on to the fourth step. Now, we talked about the attachment process, where the virus binds onto the receptor of the surface. We talked about the entry process. Now this virus has began to go into the particle, fuses with the membranes of the host cell. And now we talked about the reverse transcription process, where the virus uses this special enzyme to turn RNA into DNA. Now we talk about the genome integration. Now it's getting real. Now it's going down, because again, genome is the information that stores that which makes up who you are. It is your genetic coding. It is the computer alphabet numerological equation that gives you your genomic expression that allows for you pass on these traits in birth, and when you give birth, and you have offspring. Now, that is very important, right? That's very important, because this process means that virus is going to affect our genetics at this point. Right? So the newly synthesized viral DNA travels to the cells in this stage, into the control center of the cell, which is the nucleus. A special enzyme that is called integrase is used to insert the viral DNA into the host cell's DNA. So now this damn virus, like a ninja, has inserted its viral DNA into your DNA. Again, we're looking at the HIV replication process. We're looking at it from an informed standpoint. We understand that this affects many people, not just in our community, but around the world. And again, we're not political with this. We're looking at this from a scientific standpoint, how this thing works. Now, once it goes into that genomic integration, it begins to replicate. Now, of course, through the replication process, we begin to see the total establishment, the kinging, the taking over, the dethroning of our ability in many times to defend ourselves from these viruses, right? So you go to the replication process, and once its DNA has been inserted to the host cell's genome, the virus uses the host cell's machinery to produce new viral components, such as viral RNA and viral proteins. Now, I say to people at this stage, I look at it as an assembly line, right? It came in, took its land, put its flag up, it's built this compound, this manufacturing compound, and is now going to what you call an assembly phase, right? The second to last phase of the HIV replication process, the retrovirus replication process. HIV is a retrovirus, so is coronavirus. So you go into the assembly phase after the replication phase. The newly made viral components combine close to the cell surface and begin to form new HIV particles. Okay, now that is when we see the releasing of this virus, and the new HIV particle pushes out from the surface of the host cell. So you have the cell, you have this HIV particle that's worked its way in, flanked its way in, and starts to come out, it's coming out, boom. And now you have this HIV particle, and with the help of another viral enzyme, because that called somebody else in to help them out. You done already had one invasion, now you have 3 allies of the actual retrovirus. First, you had the ally of the help of the reverse transcriptase. Then you have the help of the integrase. Now you're going to have another ally come in called protease. Okay. And now you have not only a retrovirus, but 3 other substances that have come in to assist. And now this last step, you see, once outside of the host cell, these new HIV particles go on to affect other T cells. And again, attacking the T cell because the T cell is naturally immune. So it has to break this immunity down. It has to break that immunity down. You want to go after the strongest of the nation, and the body is a nation in many ways and scientifically, right? So they attack those CD4 T cells, which are naturally immune to these types of attacks, but get broken down and get flanked. And this is what we see that happens along the way. So that is the replication process of a retrovirus. And again, it's very important that we understand that. So I hope that in the beginning of this, I have been able to give us something, some substance, some knowledge that we understand, at least from a basic level, what a virus is, right? So I want to talk about an antivirus, because if you have a virus, you have an antivirus. And throughout this pandemic, there have been many solutions that have come out for coronavirus. Again, I make a strong disclaimer. I'm no doctor. I'm nobody that's here giving medical information. I'm giving education, 100% science-based information, as simple explanations, as simple as we can keep them, of course, because these things are very complex on complex sciences. Now, when I talk about an antiviral, I'm choosing to speak on one antiviral, and I have my reasons for doing that. But there are many different antivirals that have been approved for coronavirus, and I'm not sure if what I'm going to say has been approved for coronavirus or not, but I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Again, I'm speaking on this from a perspective of provider education. This is something we can all look into. Again, there's a very well-known and renowned doctor, Helen Yaffe. I hope I'm saying her last name right, who wrote also Tom O'Connor from Newsweek. These articles, Helen Yaffe, who wrote different articles on this antivirus called interferon, right? Now, prior to me getting any hold of any of these articles, in the beginning of this broadcast, I played Dr. Abdul Ali Muhammad. Has his ties to the Nation of Islam, a great Black doctor who is a scientist. He has a program called Your Immunity Project, right? Or Abundant Life Project. And he has a website. It's let me go to the website. It's Dr. Ali Muhammad, but you spell the word doctor out, DOCTOR. Is Dr. Alim, DOCTORALIM, dralim.com. So Dr. Abdul Ali Muhammad, one of the most renowned Black scientists in, our community, in our nation, he began to talk about this interferon. And he began to talk about it in a form of a dietary supplement called Paximune, and how this Paximune could help people regulate their immune systems and some type of defense from getting this virus and many other retroviruses and different elements that may come, throughout. So I do want to take time to give the credit and just say that, that's another reason why I'm sticking to just straight science with this, because, I played Dr. Abdul Ali Muhammad in the beginning. I don't have any affiliation with Dr. Abdul Ali Muhammad. I don't have any affiliation with the Abundant Life Project or the Your Immunity Project. I only played that because that was the reference point for me. that was the point for me when I said, okay, I got to understand what a virus is for my family first, for me, for my family, and then for my greater family, African people around the world. Like, what is a virus, right? Excuse me, along with the many other things that we have to understand, right? So I broke it down to understand what it is, and then I had to know how do you fight a virus? Well, you fight a virus with an antiviral, right? And one of the antivirals that has been known to deal with coronaviruses and other retroviruses like dengue fever, which is a hemorrhagic fever. A hemorrhagic fever is a fever that attacks the body and you get a fever, you begin to hemorrhage through pretty much every orifice of the body, in some cases through the mouth, through the eyes, through the nose, and other places, right? And this is a fever that has affected Cuba. It's also popped up Papua New Guinea and in Kenya at some point. So again, this interferon is a antiviral. So interferon are proteins. So that's why I had to drop that on us in the beginning. So now when I use these terms, we're not scratching our head like, oh, what is a protein? What is RNA? What is DNA, right? So interferons are proteins that are part of our body's natural defense system and draw their name from the word interfere because they interfere with viruses and prevent them from multiplying. So there are 3 types of interferon. There are some other types that have been discovered, but I want to talk about interferon and interferon alpha 2b. There's beta, there's gamma, there's other forms, but I'm talking about interferon alpha 2b. So interferon works to stop a disease when they are released into the bloodstream and bind to the cell receptors, right? So we talked about that process. The interferon would probably come with just based on my own informed knowledge of this. Again, somebody else could know a little bit more, right? And we could work together to figure this thing out. But interferon will probably come right after that entry phase and would stop that expression where we go into that replication process of the HIV particle or the coronavirus particle into the actual, DNA from the RNA. So the interferon works to stop a disease when they are released into the bloodstream and then bind to cell receptors. After binding, they are drawn inside of the cell cytoplasm where they cause a series of reactions that produce other proteins that fight off disease. So they actually go into the cell's structure and these interferons, these proteins, right? Now, interferons are signaling proteins because there's different types of proteins. Interferons are signaling proteins. So in addition to altering a cell's ability to fight off viruses, interferons control the activities of a number of specialized cells within the immune system. For example, interferon type 1 can either inhibit or induce the production of certain lymphocytes. When you talk about lymphocytes, you have to get into cytokine production and things like that. But again, we want to keep it basic at this moment because we can always come back at some point and really break these little things down, right? So I want to talk about the impact that interferon has had on Cuba. And I use Cuba as an example because Cuba, let me just go through this, right? So since its first application to combat dengue for Cuba's interferon has shown its efficiency and safety, in the therapy of viral disease, including hepatitis, types B and C, shingles, HIV, AIDS, and dengue fever, like I said. So because it interferes with viral multiplication with viral within the cell, it has also been used in the treatment of different types of sarcomas. So a sarcoma is a cancer that produces tumors, right? So only time will tell if interferon alpha 2b will be approved. Now, I don't know if interfere at this point, right? And this is more research that I have to do. And again, help me out. Let me know. Send me a DM. You can find me on Facebook at Abdul Siddiq. You can find me on Instagram at Uhuru Media Now, but just let me know. Has interferon alpha 2b been approved by the FDA? I don't know. And maybe that's not important to us. Maybe that's not important to us. Maybe to some of us it is. I'm not here to discuss that. I'm here to discuss the fact that it exists. There are many, but this is the one that I'm choosing to bring here tonight for the record. After the revolution in 1959, this is from a Newsweek.com article presented March 24th at 5:34 p.m. in the year 2020 by author Tom O'Connor, Newsweek.com. Check it out. After the revolution in 1959, Cuba's socialist state developed a free universal healthcare system, attaining more doctors per person than any other country in the world. This has been facilitated by the free universal access to education at all levels. The benefits are distributed globally. Some 400,000 Cuban medical professionals have worked overseas in 60 years, mainly in poor countries, providing healthcare that is free at the point of delivery. So this is important because I want to look at the legacy that interferon has had on the nation so we can kind of see where that interest of it kind of comes from, and if that's something that we need to kind of take a little bit more seriously. Because again, Dr. Abdul-Alim Muhammad has a Euroimmunity project, which is based on this dietary supplement Paximune that has some of these interferonic, I don't know how you would say it, some of these interferon capabilities through its compound, right? And again, I'm not saying that this is no cure. I'm saying that it has antiviral properties that I think that we need to look at as a people, you know, not just us nerds and those that have positions in the medical profession, but just everybody. We need to really look at this and see if this is something that we could use in our communities. So before embarking abroad on what's known officially as collaboration missions, 400 Cuban doctors and specialists were preparing for their missions by training at the Pedro Corti National Institute and has been designated as a healthcare center for training confirmed COVID-19 cases during the outbreak in Cuba. Though there were few because they had already been using this interferon and they had already been working to deal with some of these COVID cases. So I want to talk about how this thing connects, how Cuba, you know, that's one nation, but you also have China. China has also had its history with this antiviral. Again, this is public knowledge. China has also had its history with the interferon. And again, because they have dealt with SARS, right? The Southern Asian respiratory virus. Since they dealt with that, of course, they have this interferon capability, right? So, or this antiviral capability, right? This antiviral capability, because there's many types of antivirals. Interferon is just one type of antiviral. Cuba has its history with interferon, and also China. The Chinese state rolled into action to combat its spread and care for those infected with COVID-19. Among the 30 medicines chosen by the Chinese National Health Commission to fight the virus was a Cuban antiviral drug, interferon alpha 2b, which has been produced in China by the Cuban-Chinese joint venture Chang-Heber since 2003. So again, China and Cuba have a history with interferon, which is an antiviral of the many antivirals that could be used. I think that this one is one that we need to really look into, due to the fact that we have a great Black doctor and a great Black respected scientist of our community, and Dr. Abdul-Alim Muhammad, who already has a project set up in the Euroimmunity project, who already has a system set up where you can actually purchase this Paximune, this dietary supplement, from his website, which is dralim.com, DOCTORALIM.com. You can purchase that Paximune, and it has some of those capabilities that the interferon would provide to you, right? And again, I'm not affiliated with any of the goings on of the Euroimmunity project. I'm just saying this is one of the things that we need to be looking into scientifically, right? So its use prevents aggravation and complications in patients reaching the stage that ultimately result in death. Talking about how the interferon works against COVID-19 was Dr. Luis Herrera Martinez of the Cuban biotech, who was a Cuban biotech specialist. In the 1981 dengue epidemic of Cuba, we seen that is where we see the greatest, you know, use of that interferon. And of course, coming into the, 2020 pandemic, they were able to take that, which they had used for the dengue fever, and apply it. And that's why Cuba didn't have as many cases as other people, right? So Cuba was struck by an epidemic of dengue, a disease transmitted by mosquitoes. It was the first time this particularly virulent strand, which can be triggered, life-threatening dengue, hemorrhagic fever, had appeared in the Americas. The epidemic affected over 300,000 Cubans, and you had deaths every day at its peak, children, women, and men, and just, it was very tragic, but it was through the understanding of this interferon and the use of it, they were able to bring that dengue fever under control. Now, again, continuing on with, because we now know, well, again, and I hope, because knowledge is only knowledge, or truth is only truth. I'm not doing this to say what's a lie and the truth. Knowledge is knowledge. If you accept this as knowledge and you can use this to make more informed decisions during the time of this pandemic and many other viruses that are coming out, that is great. You know what I'm saying? That's the purpose of this podcast, right? But at the same time, we have to back this up with informed information and credible information. Now, this is a quote from a Caballero Torres and Lopez Matila, Cuban medical scientists. They say that it was the most extensive prevention therapy event with interferon carried out in the world. Cuba began to hold regular symposia, which quickly drew international attention. It's to this day, even when COVID first broke out, we seen the world kind of, I don't know if it was ever on the forefront of the news, but I know that many in the science community knew about this antiviral, and many nations were kind of banging on the door for this. Now, America also has its uses of interferon, and it has interferon and produces interferon in many different pharmaceutical names and terms. You can find interferon in many pharmaceutical names and terms. Once you begin to do your research, you'll find it called Intron A. You'll find it under the name of Rebitron. You'll find it under the name of Roferon A. You'll find it under the name of Peg Intron. You'll find it under the name of Pegasus, Rebitol, and Hebron, which is the one that is produced by that Chinese-Cuban venture. So that is a virus. A virus is simply, but we have to get into the ins and outs and the expressions of what a virus is. But viruses are very, can be explained simply, right, as nucleic acid, either RNA or DNA, wrapped in a protein shell. That protein shell attaches onto a host, and through a genomic viral expression in a parasitic life cycle begins to attack the organs and different things of that nature. And then we deal with this virus, and either we live or we die based on how that virus carries out. I mean, that's like the morbid truth of the life cycle of a virus, because without the host, the virus doesn't live, right? And many times, because the virus needs to live, the host dies many times. And you'll hear scientific expression in the community, you'll hear that people will say, well, viruses are not intending to kill the host. You see what I'm saying? Because then how would the virus live? Because not all viruses can transfer on through after death. So again, it's so much more that we can go to. And I do want to come back for another episode to really get into what this thing is, because we have to understand this from every level. Now, we understand that also what is a virus. We understand antivirals. There are many virals that are available. One of the antivirals that I find very magnificent and that I've taken out a lot of time myself as just a nerd, as just a geek, as just a brother who wants to bring this information for the betterment of our people. I think that interferon is one of those antivirals that, since it is already naturally produced by the body, and that's through the cytokine process of this protein that is produced by the body, and that's something we could talk about later on. I think interferon is a lot, just my personal opinion. It's the only personal opinion I'm going to give. I think interferon is better, is one of the better antivirals, because it, throughout what I've seen, it doesn't have some of the side effects that some of these other drugs have. Now, it's not all about what the FDA says, not all about medicine and stuff. For me, it is also about looking at botanical, looking at natural herbal remedies like elderberry, like burdock root, like different teas and herbs. There's a website that we can go to. We can get fresh herbal tea, right? I want to send a shout out to Modupe, who has a great, a line of teas and herbs at oladeorganics.com. You spell it OLADE organics.com. Now, I gave you Dr. Alim's website. Dr. Alim, you can go and you can get the Paximune at doctoralim.com, dralim.com, doctoralim, dralim.com. You can go get the Paximune and see for yourself, right? Look it up. Look up interferon, look up Paximune, go to Your Immunity Project on Facebook, check it out, right? See for yourself how it works for you. And that's that. If some of those antiviral capabilities in the Paximune, which is the dietary supplement offered on his website. Then I want you to go to Olade Organics, OLADE ORGANICS. Olade is spelled OLADE. Olade Organics. Right? We know how to spell organics, right? Oladeorganics.com. And I want you to look at the line of herbal teas that are there, because these teas also help to boost and regulate the immune system, we don't have to go one way, one thing. We can use all things to help us as we deal with this virus. You see, I want to thank all of those who took out the time to sit with me tonight and take out the time of your evening to join me as I do this podcast, the first episode of a Uhuru Media Group presentation on Ask Siddiq Live. You can check out my science breaks, which I do these science breaks. I've had science breaks on many of the terms that I've talked about. You can watch them on Facebook and Instagram. I post them on my story. I post them as reels. You can find me on Facebook as Abdul Siddiq. You can also find me on Instagram at Uhuru Media Now. I want to thank you for your time here tonight. And I want to ask the question, because just this video cannot explain what a virus is. I want to ask the question. If you have a question, go ahead and type it now. I don't know if you have a question, but you can ask a question. I'll answer the question the best that I can. But regardless, if you have a question at any point throughout now or any time that you watch this, ask a question. I'll answer the question. Send me a DM. If you have information on science, history, and cultural perspective that you want to share with me, if you want to join me on one of these broadcasts and you want to have me bring you in and you want to discuss with me, we are family. I don't have a problem with that. Let me know. You can give me some information. We can sit here. We can discuss it. I don't mind doing that as well. For me, it's all about us having a communal understanding of basic sciences, right? So I'm just that everyday brother, professor. You know what I'm saying? I want to send a shout out to everybody who shared the flyer and everything leading up to this. And I want to leave us with the question, and then I want to end it when I want to play Dr. Abdul Muhammad one more time for those who didn't get to see it. But I want to leave it on this. What is a virus? It's not over. We have to break this down. We got to understand what is a virus. That is my question for the community, for Black people, family. What is a virus? I thank you. I hope that this was informative and it was exciting, inspirational. Again, Black Power. Love you, fam.
Coronavirus. This is a genetically engineered, weaponized version of coronavirus that has been married to 4 genes from HIV and probably other genes from perhaps other viral pathogens. The short history is Dr. Lieber of Harvard University, the chief biomolecular scientist at Harvard University, dug up some frozen bodies from the tundra in Alaska. This was maybe 3 or 4 years ago, to investigate what killed them during the Spanish flu epidemic. He isolated that virus from 100 years ago and resurrected it, you could say. But found out that because of the frozen conditions over time, the virus had lost its infectivity. You may question, why would somebody dig up a virus that killed over 100 million people and brought an end to World War I? Well, you would have to ask Dr. Lieber that. But he did that, and then when the infectivity was not what he wanted, then he paired it with 4 genes from HIV and perhaps some other things. And now you have a highly contagious coronavirus that is infecting human beings. And not only from animal to human transmission, but now verified cases, human to human transmission through the air. So you could say that this coronavirus 2020 is the descendant of the MERS virus, the Middle Eastern respiratory virus that killed many people in the Middle East, and the SARS virus that I think that goes back to 2003, 2004, that killed many, many people. Now, the SARS virus was the first indication to the Chinese people that someone was out to get them. The SARS virus was genetically engineered to infect Asian people, preferably. And the Chinese realized this. And so since that time, they have actually been on the defensive. Now, the question is whether this latest virus is also a bioweapon engineered to destroy people of Asian descent. And it seems to have another feature. It seems to preferentially infect men as opposed to women. Seems to be much more lethal in men than women. And even though it's considered to be a respiratory virus that causes a respiratory illness, the other interesting factor is that it seems to have a predilection for male testicles. And even in those that recover, the question is, will they be sterilized as after this COVID infection, even if they survive? Bill Gates, along with Dr. Lieber and Johns Hopkins University in October of 2019, conducted a simulation, computer simulation of a coronavirus outbreak. And they determined through computer simulations that such an outbreak would lead to the death of 65 million people. Now, the current experience in China with a 2.3% mortality rate shows that globally we could expect at least 165 million deaths from this virus. So what is it all for? I think it's for the purpose of slowing down the growth of China as a dominant economic, political, and economic power in the world. That is, of course, if it really is a bioweapon. If it's not really a bioweapon, it certainly has taken the U.S.-China trade war to another level. Trade war has become biological warfare, and people are being targeted with their lives. Part of the trade war, of course, was the controversy with a company called Huawei, the leaders in 5G technology. The center of 5G technology is China, and the center of 5G technology in China is Wuhan City, or Hubei, in Hubei province. And when they turned on or switched on the most potent 5G network in the world in Wuhan City, that's when the epidemic broke out. So there are scientists who think that there is an electronic component to what would otherwise just be a biological phenomenon. A virus is on the borderline of living things versus non-living things. It is protein wrapped around genetic material, either RNA or DNA. It is susceptible to electronic frequencies. Viruses can be activated by 5G 60 cycle frequency radiation that was turned on in Wuhan City and just coincidentally happened at the same time as a viral outbreak. Could there be a connection? One final point that I think the world should consider. From my point of view as a medical doctor, someone who knows a little bit about public health, I don't think that the Chinese government could be faulted in any way for their response to whatever happened, whether it was a natural phenomenon or whether it turns out to really be a bio attack. But their response to it was heroic and correct. They built 3 1,000-bed hospitals in a little more than a week. That is phenomenal. They provided hospital care for thousands of people who otherwise would have been left out in the cold to die. And so this is something to ponder. Is the United States capable of the same response, public health wise? Is Europe capable of the same response? Is Africa, is India, are the other nations, are Brazil and other nations in South America and throughout the world? Is Japan, Korea, are they capable of the same heroic, monumental public health measures undertaken by the Chinese, who seem, I mean, optimistically I'm speaking now, they seem to have contained the spread of the virus in China through these drastic means. But suppose you had the same level of infection in New York City or Los Angeles or Chicago or some other major city in Europe, as we now see in Italy and Spain and Germany, cases breaking out. Well, this is the tip of the iceberg. 80-some cases now in Long Island, New York, in Los Angeles, in Texas, and other places. People under quarantine. We don't know how many people are really infected because the CDC has only given a little more than 400 tests total. So if they're reporting 50 or 60 cases, that sounds like a small number, and it is, but you'd only tested 400 people. So how can you be sure about the total number of infections in the country? You can't be. So all precautions must be in order. Facial masks are not going too far. Frequent hand washing is not going too far. Avoiding contact with public surfaces is not going too far. Avoiding public gatherings is not going too far. We don't actually know the full characteristics of what we're dealing with, but we must take those things into consideration that we are learning, where these outbreaks are taking place throughout the world. A weak Clorox solution, a cap full of Clorox in a gallon of water, can be used as a disinfectant on surfaces. I use essential oils mixed in water, things like geranium and other essential oils, eucalyptus, camphor. These essential oils mixed in water, sprayed in a house, will keep germs at bay. These are old-fashioned, traditional methods. I think the public health service in America is so decrepit and disabled that every American citizen should consider you're on your own, and you have to do what you can do to protect yourself and your family, because I don't think that the government agencies are going to be able. They're not equipped. The hospitals don't have the space to accommodate you, so you're going to have to accommodate yourself. Well, the question about whether or not this COVID-20 coronavirus is natural or man-made, I think that the fact that it is man-made is beyond question right now. I think the genetic sequences that have been done throughout the world shows that it did not have a natural origin. You can't naturally combine HIV genes with coronavirus genes. That just doesn't happen in nature. However, nature is capable of things that we may not be able to conceive of. So, for example, one of the things that people are becoming aware of are the tremendous number of deaths that take place every year from ordinary influenza. In the United States, for example, every year you will have between 30 and 40,000 deaths from regular influenza, and that's considered to be normal. And it could even range higher than that, 60, 70,000 per year, and some years lower than that. So we have good seasons and bad seasons. This is from influenza. Well, where did the influenza virus come from? I'm using this as an example for all viruses. Where did they come from? Well, if you have, as you do in China, a situation where you have population congestion, you have human beings living in close proximity with animals. You have human beings living in close proximity to pigs and ducks and chickens. And so the history of influenza is that this is a virus that naturally recombined to produce something that can cause human disease. A bird virus infects a duck in a pond in China. That bird virus gets picked up by a pig who drinks from that pond water. And then that virus recombines inside the body of the pig so that it begins to infect the pig. A bird virus, in other words, has now jumped into a pig. And then who lives right next to the pig, or who ends up eating the pig or slaughtering the pig, is a human being. And so now an original bird virus that somehow was able to infect a pig now makes a second leap, species leap, you could say, into a human being. And now a bird virus that became a swine virus is now a human virus, and we call it influenza. And it has been plaguing the world ever since people thought it was a good idea to live in close proximity to a food source like ducks and pigs. So it's possible, it's remotely possible, that this novel coronavirus is a natural virus, like they say. It came from a meat market in China. It came from bats. It came from this. It came from that. Well, that sounds like the green monkey story related to HIV. And then it turns out green monkeys had very little to do with HIV. Human biomolecular engineers had everything to do with the development of HIV as a biological weapon. And I think that the evidence is very strong right now, and I think the proof positive will come in the future. This was a biologically engineered weapon, probably done by Dr. Lieber and his team from Harvard University in conjunction with Johns Hopkins University and with Wuhan University in China and other government agencies in China. They developed this. They will have to explain to the world why they thought this